The concentration of carbon emissions is global. And it's not different here in Ontario than it is off somewhere in some little island. It's the same across the globe. So when emissions go up, they go up everywhere. And it's that concentration that's changing our climate. And trying to get people to understand that we can do something about it. And in fact, things are being done about it. Progress is being made, but we have to accelerate that progress. And we have to accelerate people's interest.
So I want to take this opportunity to welcome Fran Bezos and Leah Taylor Roy to our breaking episode today. It's really special. It's a great opportunity for us to get to co-host again with someone and to bring a really interesting story on how a person goes from, teaching about academics and everyday at school to really teaching about saving our planet and their journey along the way. So thank you so much, Fran, for coming in today.
Thank you.
And look forward to sharing this story with you. It's been one of those things that over the years, it used to be something that you would do kind of like by the way.
Right.
Charity work, philanthropy work, environmental work that you do. And then after a little while, it started being realized that this is not a by the way thing to do. These are really
a lot of people want to leave their
things to do.
Yeah, a lot of people want to leave their legacy.
Yeah.
And the people that realize they're not going to live forever.
Yeah.
And
that enough is enough.
Unlike the billionaires that still think they have to make more billions, right?
Exactly.
But I think people do start to think about their legacy after, if you have any sense, after a certain age, you start to think, what am I leaving behind?
Exactly.
So,
great place to start.
Well, I was just going to ask you that, Fran. So, like, you got a really interesting sort of journey. I mean, where did you start, and how did you get to where you are today? I mean, was it something that you studied in school that you always had an interest in, as far as say environment would be concerned, or did you start somewhere like history, or did you start somewhere like call it more business? How did you get to? What was your starting point, would you say?
Experiential, the water.
Yeah.
Lake Simcoe. Simcoe used to be so pristine.
Okay.
That I would swim out by. We'd a really modest little cabin cottage. And I'd swim in Lake Simcoe for hours on end. And if I got thirsty, I'd just drink the water because it was that clean.
Okay.
I mean, it was, and collect stones because you could see every single color. It was just incredible. Now I go to Lake Simcoe and it just makes me want to weep.
So, it's something that you've been like attached to.
Yeah, I love the environment. I love trees. I mean, to me, trees are a religious experience, just looking at trees. Yeah.
When did you start actually saying to yourself, I'm going from being the person who's swimming here and enjoying this environment to, I feel like I got to do something here?
So for a long time.
Yeah.
I think I've seen the climate, the environment degrade over the years. And I've been a climate activist for a long time, but really, really became actively involved after I retired. I lived in Nova Scotia. We had a bed and breakfast in Nova Scotia, so I didn't have a whole lot of time to be an activist. But then we moved to Newmarket, and I started attending climate activist organizations and meetings. And we started one here in Newmarket, Drawdown. It was called Drawdown Newmarket Aurora. And now it's transitioned to a different name, Climate Action Newmarket Aurora.
Okay.
And so I'm an active member of that, and it's fabulous. I mean, I feel like instead of just going to bed feeling like, oh my God, this is the end of the world, we're going to burn up, the world is we're destroying our planet, I'm starting to feel like we can do something. And I'm seeing movement all over the world, not just here, but all over the world. And it's been great to see climate has become a topic, become a voting issue. Because, 5-6 years ago, it wasn't. People didn't, when you wanted to talk to people about that, it wasn't really an issue. Now it's a big issue, climate. And I think, the government has to take credit for that. They formed, a ministry that is just dealing with climate action, with climate change and the environment. You have a minister who has former member of Greenpeace. I got to say that's pretty cool. And I think the people that I talked to, I when we first came to Newmarket Aurora, I did join NAFLA, Newmarket Aurora Federal Liberal Association. And I got frustrated because they didn't want to talk about the environment. I did. They didn't. I quit. Now I rejoined just to push the climate agenda. And people are so receptive.
I think sometimes, and I'm going to take the layman approach here.
Sure.
Uninformed. I think I know something about this because I'll hear it. Every so often it'll come up in a conversation somewhere when you're sitting casually with people. But then I find that layman, typical person just touches on it and then kind of moves on.
Yeah.
We hear about it in the news. We'll hear someone saying politics talking about it. We'll hear an activist talking about it. We enjoy the benefits of the work that's being done quite often. And sometimes then we don't realize what actually goes into it and how much is actually needed to make something happen. So it's interesting. You said earlier that you noticed, something had to be done. For example, you used Lake Simcoe as your starting point. What kind of change are we talking about? Because sometimes with something like climate, the big things, we don't always notice it very blatantly right away. It's becomes small things. They say you don't notice something, nothing changes every day, but then one day you turn around and everything's different, right? But then you've seen it. So what are the kind of things you would say, you just pointed out to Lake Simcoe, but it could have been something just related to a specific area?
Well, now it's so blatant.
Or is it a bunch of things collectively too?
It is, because now it's like I can't understand how people aren't most concerned about that. If you love your kids,
right,
and if you love your grandkids. I mean, my grandson is 15 years old. Do I care about what kind of planet he's going to live on? Do I care about what kind of a world? Is it going to be on fire? Is he going to be able to breathe? Will he have to go live in some kind of bunker in order to survive? Is that the kind of world we want to leave for our kids? So you can see it happening everywhere. I don't understand how people aren't alarmed.
Sometimes people are not making maybe the connection though, right?
But how can they not?
Well,
it is in the public eye if people want to see it.
Okay.
And I guess maybe the government's role is to make it more obvious, make the connection between what fossil fuel and, fossil fuel emissions are doing and how we can stop it. And also to highlight all the things that are being done, because globally things are being done everywhere. And that is because of pushes like the carbon price on pollution. If you put a price on carbon, world scientists will tell you that that's going to that's going to be the most effective tool we can use all over the world, because then business will start to say, oh, it's going to cost me too much money if I'm using fossil fuels, so maybe I need to transition. So they're going to start investing. Governments are going to get on board. Governments already had. China is now the world's biggest producer of alternative energy. I mean, that's got to be something. Look at the U.S. The Biden administration has done billions and billions of dollars. And in that, they've created all these jobs. And we're doing the same thing. So
when you're going through this, activist work that you're doing, and you can see the passion, you see like the commitment. Quite often, well, the whole thing is that you don't usually get passionate about, say, so many other things. Like it's things that really matter that people get passionate about. So just the fact that there is passion in something like this is a hint that this is important to us as human beings. Yeah. But for yourself, when you're going through this experience yourself, and it's great that you have the information, what I'd love to understand more, and I think it's also to make you, for me, more relatable. Mm-hmm. I want to understand just you, sure, right? So then to me, the work that you do kind of follows after that for me. Mm. And I think that that's true for just when you talk about why people don't get it. I think it's because it's like, to them, it's like rocket science. They might not know rocket science, but if they like their scientist, then they'll take an interest because it's the personal journey. That's what I've always found. Yeah. And so I want to understand you specifically, because you go through hardship to do what you're doing. It's not necessarily easy work, right? So when you're going through this work that you're doing, what have you noticed to be, obviously is very fulfilling, but I'd love to also understand a little bit about what drives you, like you personally, right? When you come into doing the work that you're doing, you find yourself, for example, when you first started, under-resourced. That's one of the first things I heard. There wasn't interest in what you were talking about necessarily to the extent that you thought there ought to be.
Sure.
Well, sometimes people just throw up their hands and they say, no one's interested. It does happen, and then they walk away. So what was it for you that kind of kept you like, I got to keep going? What was that? Like, how is it that you didn't lose your morale on this?
Do you know, I'm an optimist. I'm an internal optimist. And people say, oh, the end of the world's coming, it's inevitable. No, it's not inevitable. I mean, how dare they say such a thing? And I see what keeps me going is the belief that there's this turning point. There's going to be this, there's already a turning point. There's already been a turning point. Like I said, people never wanted to talk about climate before. Now everybody's talking about it. And since this last run of rain, an endless rain here, people are saying, oh, this is so weird. I'm saying, oh, yeah. And then when it was so hot, a month or so ago, people are saying this is so peculiar. People are starting to notice. Their everyday neighbors are starting to notice. What keeps me going? My grandson. I mean, yeah, he's the one. I look at him in the morning and I think, oh, wow, yeah, this kid is amazing. I want him to enjoy the things that I enjoyed. I want him to be able to swim in beautiful lakes. I wanted him to be able to walk. We walk on the trail together. There's lots of trails in Newmarket, beautiful trails. Yeah. So, yeah, I want this to be there.
When you first started moving this direction, you talked about like really taking it more, focusing more on this after you got to a point where you were retired, you could focus more on something that you had such a passion for, that you saw was so important. In fact, that actually happens quite a bit in life. Yep. People get to the important stuff that they want, right? At a certain point, they're like, no, I really need to focus in on this. And the work that you're doing, it's work. It's not something that you do kind of like casually. You really got to dedicate to it. You might find yourself working harder, actually, sometimes.
Working, I believe it.
Working, right? For another kind of currency at the end of the day. But I find that interesting. So when you first started, like you said, not everybody just jumped out of their seat and says, hey, Fran, let's help you out with this idea, right? So how did you then go about yes, you thought about your grandson. That's great. That is a great driver. And it's not just obviously for yourself. You think about everyone's grandchildren. You're talking about all of humanity. There you go. Yeah. So when you started coming across, like, say, objections at the beginning, and you didn't have the data and you didn't have the answer, right? How did you handle those moments, your earlier days and kind of what you were doing when you're starting to get into it and you're like, oh, I didn't know I got to go this way and this is who I got to talk to. You learn all these things over time. So when you first started experiencing that, how did you navigate it?
I think we worked with Lead Now organization, and we started as a small group, just trying to talk to as many people as possible, going to Newmarket Today, news, writing letters to the Star. We do all kinds of that. But then we had a town hall, climate action town hall, and we did that in conjunction with Lead Now. Then we had an all candidates debate, talking about climate, but talking about issues, but also talking about focusing on climate.
What did you notice there, like when you were trying to have an all candidates debate and bringing them together and making this an important topic for them? Because as you said, it wasn't always at the forefront.
We saw the energy in the room, and people do get energized, but then people get busy with their lives.
They do.
And they sort of stop focusing and focus on things like the cost of living and, the cost of gas. They'll say, oh boy, the gas is so expensive, not looking at the rebate that they get. But focusing on mundane issues without realizing that this climate crisis affects everything. It's affecting the cost of living, probably responsible for the COVID-19 epidemic, because all of these things are environmental. You know, when we decide to take away all this farmland, what are we going to eat? You know, there's already a food shortage, a global food shortage. And now we're going to take away all this prime farmland in Canada and build houses on it instead of building where there's already infrastructure. They want Newmarket, for example, to build all these houses. And we don't have the sewers. We don't have the capacity. And our mayor has been very good at pointing that out to the Ford government, but they don't listen.
So when you're going through this and you see that frustration, yeah, and then, you know, how is it that you come along and work through this? Because at the end of the day, you're talking to businesses, you're talking to, you know, constituents, people and businesses, and you notice the same similar frustration.
Absolutely, and this is why I want to thank Fran, because really the work that you're doing is so important. And one of the things I often wonder, because I too waited to get involved in politics, or not politics. I don't even see it as politics, right? I see representation and people issues to really devote my entire time to that. But one of the things I think we have, and I'd love to know how you get people who aren't retired or who aren't at the point where they've discovered this passion or this cause, how do you get them to start to pay attention and to actually say, hey, it's not just about the cost of living today, or even listening to, you know, rhetoric. How do you get them to really start to think about on a day-to-day basis these things, as opposed to, like, you know, we're going to save Lake Simcoe, which is a great thing we have to do, but to incorporate into the day-to-day lives and conversations?
It's a very difficult thing. It's a very, very difficult thing to convince people. I think, you know, that's where government and education, I think government's role is to educate the public. And that's what has not been done strongly enough at all. Yeah. As I think it's the government's, like, the Wynne government fell because the Wynne government didn't let people know all the progressive things that the Kathleen Wynne government had put forward. She had made so many progressive moves, like working with the cap and trade with Quebec and California and Ontario to work together. That would have been a powerhouse economical windfall for you know, and for the climate issue and also for the economy. And I think it's government's job to educate the public, because that's what we try to do. We send out letters. We hold town halls. We hold out, you know, when we go to street festivals and farmers market, we have an information booth. And to tell you the truth, it's hard to get people engaged.
Fran, what have you noticed when you're having these town halls, say, for example, or when you're going through this, from your recollection, what do you notice is like maybe the top one or top two things that somebody would say, I didn't know that. I never made that connection from my life to what these guys are all in and not about. You know, that's how it seems to call it the layman. I mean, just going to be honest. Like, what's all the yelling and screaming? My roads are paved. You know, I'm driving my car. I'm taking my vacation. You know, I've got my media channels. I'm keeping up with my friends. What's all the ruckus about, right? So when they hear something, somebody goes, hold on a second, I didn't know that. Yeah. What would you say were, like, say, one or two things that when you're having this, that education, that information that you found to be, you know, that gets people to go, yeah, I didn't know that.
We have a website that has all that information listed. Yeah. When we have a town hall, we had a speaker, for example, at our last town hall, Art Lightfoot, who was a really great, Lightstone, at putting forward that information. Where is the connection? Like carbon emissions, the concentration of carbon emissions is global. It's not different here in Ontario than it is, you know, off somewhere in some little island somewhere. It's the same across the globe. So when emissions go up, they go up everywhere. And it's that concentration that's changing our climate, and it's trying to get people to understand that we can do something about it. And in fact, things are being done about it. Progress is being made, but we have to accelerate that progress. And we have to accelerate people's interest, and we have to elect governments that will do something about it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, you know, we were talking earlier about health, and your health.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, it's kind of it's human nature. Like we focus on the immediate, right? So what we see is what is impacting us now, and we don't necessarily think about what is the long-term benefit, what is the investment value of something we're doing today, because today is where we're at. Today is where we're focused, right? And so it's trying to say, well, it takes time, but the long-term impact of this will be beneficial, which is the problem for a lot of people. And again, you can see it with health, you can see it with the environment, you can see it with so many things where a dollar spent today, people will go, I don't want to spend that dollar, even if it means they're going to have saved $10 down the road. And I think it's like that with climate change.
Let's look at the immediate. Toronto just had a gigantic flood, right? That's going to cost me $3,000 to $4,000. I'm not sure exactly how much. But there's no way I'm not having it, because it would cost me a heck of a lot more if my basement floods and everything gets wrecked down, you know?
Yeah.
And
well, even the cost of those traffic jams on the DVP.
Yeah.
When you look at the lost productivity, the time, the emergency services, and this is what I think people often, they look at just, this is what we're paying, but what about, like, if we don't do anything, how much are we going to be paying on the other side? And this is where the human mind, I always find like behavioral science so interesting, right? Yeah. Why do we see one thing and not another? And I think, like, when you talk about the price on pollution program, you know, and you asked, you know, one of the things that people don't know that astound me is that you get rebate checks every 3 months. Every Canadian who files a tax return gets a rebate check.
And it more than covers the cost of gas.
Don't know that.
Yeah.
Or they'll say, well, first of all, it's not well labeled, et cetera. But the fact that for 80% of Canadians, you get more money back than you pay out in this fuel surcharge. And people don't, for some reason, they just they see prices going up, they see themselves struggling, and they want to find something to blame. And so they won't really look at all of the facts. They'll listen to the rhetoric or something easy out there. And they don't really look at it, but it is so misunderstood, this program, and it confounds me why, to a certain extent, like why people aren't able to take the time to sit down and look and say, but it's because we have busy lives. It's because other things are there, and we don't really realize what's the impact if we don't do it.
People blame the cost of gasoline on the surcharge instead of saying it's a global price.
Yeah.
You know, the global market indicates how much gas is going to cost at the pump. This surcharge is tiny in comparison, and you're getting whatever it is worth. You're getting it back in a rebate check anyway.
Well, let me just say one thing about that, because one of the interesting things is when you're talking to people, and a lot of people, also the price of food, right? Affordability is a really big issue, and you see that because that's something day to day, like, and especially as women, more than men still, we go to the grocery stores, we handle household budgets to a large extent, and you're seeing it. And it's really easy to hear something that says, well, it's because the government is putting on this price on pollution, right? This carbon levy. And yet, you often, if you just talk to people and say, well, look, you know, the price of romaine lettuce doubled. Why did that happen? It was drought in California. We import most of our romaine lettuce from California. It was a drought. That's why it went up. And they'll say, oh, no, it's the price of pollution. You say, well, the price on pollution has been the same for a year. It only gets increased once a year. And actually, food prices, when the price of pollution went up, food prices were coming down. Inflation's been going down, and food prices are going down. So how does that work? And it's due to this. And I think that basic need for people to have a simple answer sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, people are looking for a simple answer, and if they can just say, this is what the problem is, it helps us deal with all of the things that are going on, Fran. So
you know what? I'd like to travel.
Yeah.
You want to talk about personal. I like to travel. I find it interesting. Two summers ago, we went to Sanibel Island. I had gone to Sanibel Island 15 years ago. Magnificent. 2 years ago, we go to Sanibel Island, and it was covered in green, the blue-green algae. There were dead fish everywhere. You couldn't even breathe for the smell. We had to leave. They actually gave us our money back. We had prepaid for our accommodation. They gave us our money back because you couldn't even breathe. It was so disgusting and so smelly. The beaches were covered with dead fish. It was just unbelievable.
I think that's honestly, I think that's a very interesting parallel.
Yeah.
One of the things that's personally interesting to me is our overall wellness.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to be well.
Right.
And how come, generally speaking, we're not as well as we want to be? And it's exactly that, is that we find that there's this feeling of almost like we're immortal. It's never going to touch us. Sure. And then we kind of are neglectful. We know what the right thing is to do. We know we ought to eat better, sleep better, exercise, whatever. But then these other, let's just call it priorities, or these other things that seem to be more immediately, drawing our attention, we focus on. And then all of a sudden, a little while goes by, and it's like we said, we don't notice it all the time. But then all of a sudden, one day we wake up and we're like, I'm not well. And everything comes kind of crashing down. I find when we talk about climate or environment, things that are like a little bit longer term in nature, just like our health and wellness, I think that they move in quite a parallel way. And if we were to pay attention, we'd start noticing that, it is true. We don't pay attention to our health and wellness. And then one day we're like, oh gosh, I should have done that. So do we want the same thing to happen on a larger scale now?
But it connects back to the environment, because our health and wellness is impacted by it. And when you look at forest fires now, right? And you always see it on the vulnerable populations, Fran. I'm sure you see this and you talk to people. But the fact that we just see the immediate impact on the vulnerable populations, people with asthma, people who are older, people with an immune system. But the same effect is happening to those of us who are well. You just don't see it immediately. No. It's going to come down the road. So it really links to that whole idea.
Look at the smog last summer. Like I said, last summer we went to Greece. We got this fluky weather. In Athens, it was nice and cool, 22 degrees. In Ontario, it was 30 degrees when we, most of the time it was hotter here than it was in Athens. Very weird. Mm-hmm. But then when we came, because there were wildfires here everywhere, in Ontario, BC, all over the place. And we came back and it was covered in smog. You couldn't see the sky for this horrible smog. I did not want to go out, and I love to walk. I didn't want to go out for any kind of lengthy walks, like we were going for 5-minute walks, because I didn't want to breathe in that smoggy air. You could smell, it smelled like smoke. It was horrible, as if you'd had a fire in your house.
In some states, I understand, and maybe in other places, actually, I think it's called a smog index or something, right? When you go outside, and now they have it. Yeah. The fact that that's even a thing is a little concerning, right?
Yeah, and that the United States was blaming Canada for pollution. Right. We're always the
And our pollution at that time in Toronto was worse than Beijing. I mean,
No, and I think that I think people are starting to see that. It's just making that connection on a day-to-day basis. And I think that to do that, you're so right, Fran, the education is so important so that people understand that. And it sounds condescending to say that. It's not condescending. It's just like education. As a past teacher, education is fundamental, right? Education awareness is so fundamental. And I think we need to do a better job so that in our day-to-day life, and this is one of the things the Price on Pollution is trying to do, is to say when you use or you do something that's using fossil fuels, the price, the environmental and health price, because our healthcare costs are going up as a result as well, right?
Well, for sure.
Those costs are now being included in the price you're paying. So you actually get the real cost of what you're doing, as opposed to just a cost from an oil and gas producer. And that is the way that on a day-to-day basis, people then are responding, because people respond to price signals. And we need to make sure that, and what we have to do a better job of is explaining to people, the reason there is this carbon levy is because that is actually what it's costing our society. Like, it's not just the price you're paying, because there's the environmental price, all these forest fires, the floods, the droughts, all these things that are happening. And then what we do is we say, okay, but everybody gets back a check across the country, the same check, regardless of how much fossil fuel you burn, everybody gets the same check. So that at the end of the day, it incentivizes people. So you can make money off of this program. So if you say, I'm going to get the same check back, but hey, if I put in a heat pump, if I take public transit, if I switch to an electric vehicle, if I move to a smaller home, that amount I'm paying is going to go down. But the check will stay the same. So I come out ahead. And that kind of thinking, and that's the beauty of this program, why so many Nobel laureates and scientists worldwide support it, because they see it's one way to translate a much larger problem into our day-to-day decision-making and actions.
And we need to see I think part of it is educating the public about what causes, what's the environmental impacts, the financial impacts. I also think the other side has to be brought forward. This is the progress that's been made.
Yes.
Incredible progress globally.
I think keeping that message, the wins, talking about the positive things that are going on, I think would be very, very helpful. I think that sometimes it's almost like, it's not even condescending. The word I was thinking about was being scolded.
Yeah.
They're like, you're not doing enough. You're not doing enough. It's like, okay, can somebody tell me maybe what I am doing that's better than what I was doing yesterday? And there's some kind of reward there. So talking about these kind of things, I think would be great. And I was going to ask you this, is that, what have you noticed that's gotten better? And you talked about some change. You talked about hope. I'd love to start getting into understanding, like, how you see the tide shifting. What is it that gives you that hope? And what are the things that you're noticing being done better, for example, today than yesterday?
This is one of the conversations I have with the people that are in my climate action group, because frustration. And I say, but listen, 5 years ago when we tried to talk to people, nobody even believed in climate change. Nobody even knew this was an issue. Now it's on everybody's tongue. Every politician is mentioning climate. Every single person is talking about climate. And that has become a major part of the conversation. The other thing is, I just read this book, How to Be a Climate Optimist, Chris Turner. And it's fantastic. He talks about, he's gone around the world and looked at all the different things that have changed, all these climate actions, and what impacts it's made. There have been enormous impacts. Pollution has gone down here. Emissions have gone down there. It's not enough, but we're on the right trajectory. Yeah. We just have to keep on going, and we have to support the positive actions that are being taken.
I know we have to wrap up, but can I give you one very timely example?
Yeah.
Okay, and there's numerous, but one timely example, the Olympics in Paris. The mayor dove into the Seine. The events are being held in the River Seine because of action that's been taken to address pollution. Before, you could never even imagine that. And our Great Lakes are cleaner than they were. We have, it's the inventory of emissions, but they're coming down. Yeah. In Canada, so many sectors are really doing much better. We have technology, and we're gaining in terms of leadership in the world and our economy through all these things. So I could give lists and lists of things. The problem is it's not in the general conversation, but we are. And when people say it's not having an impact, it is. But it's like healthcare. Sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4 years before you start to see the real results.
Sure.
But we're seeing it now. We're seeing it, and our emissions have come down. The only sector where they've gone up is oil and gas. And oil and gas is less than 5% of our Canada's GDP. It's actually 3.6%. It's almost all foreign owned, and the money goes to foreign ownership. And it produces 31% of our greenhouse gas emissions.
It's pretty sure.
People don't understand. It's again, these are facts that aren't out there, but when you look at all the other things we do as Canadians, like all the other manufacturing, industry, green tech, food production, food waste, we're making gains. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's great.
As a layman, for sure, I've noticed it over the years that we're doing a bit more as a family. Yeah. And I feel like our kids it's part of their regular vocabulary. Yeah. Right? I think those are really big wins to put it front center into people's minds. Yeah. And so, Fran, maybe you could tell us a little bit more. What would your advice be to somebody like myself? What are the small things? You already gave some great examples. You can replace this with that. What are the smaller things that we can start for people who are not looking at this, who are like, that's too big a problem for me to deal with?
Do you know what? There's this whole list of stuff that I've done.
Right.
To change things.
My memory will take like 2 things or 3 things. Yeah. And then I'll forget the 3.
So we don't use, this is a glass bottle. And I forgot to take my water bottle with me, so I bought this. Now, of course, I just refill it, and it's perfect. Fits in my pocket. Yeah. We don't have any plastic. If anything comes in a plastic bag, I wash the plastic bag, save it, and reuse it. Mm-hmm. I take, we have only LED lights everywhere. Anything I buy is energy efficient. So there's things that you can do on a day-to-day basis.
That's
Just
it.
do the recycling. Don't buy more than you need. Like, stop with the shopping. People shop and shop. You go to Costco. I'll go to Costco because I can get, certain things cheaper. But
food waste is a huge problem.
food waste is huge.
50% of the food in Canada is wasted.
So that makes a difference.
Oh, it makes an enormous difference. Food waste is enormous.
Yep.
And so I basically buy day to day, and I buy what I'm going to eat and not throw stuff out. And we compost what we can't, peels and stuff like that, we compost in the garden.
Which makes, at the end of the day, your dollar go further anyway for your family.
Way further.
Which
waste
today is an important thing.
Yeah.
And let me add one thing to that little easy list, because plant-based foods, eating more plant foods.
Yeah.
We have this amazing national food, our food guide in Canada. It really emphasizes
Terrific
that.
food guide.
Animal proteins, where they're good, and we people like them, we can use them, but just even twice a week, have a meal that doesn't use an animal protein. You're helping the environment.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. And it's really interesting when you start to boil it down, because, you can grow plants and you can get protein from plants 10 times more efficiently in terms of the amount of water used, the fertilizer, all the things that go into it. And it's so simple.
I think that's really insightful. Like, that I'm taking away from today is, like, I always think about success not as like some point, but as a series of habits and routines, and take one at a time. And just keep building up on a habit, building up on a routine, and then now your trajectory is kind of more set. Then it's inevitable.
Yeah,
you're going to get there. It's just a matter of when. So I love that you're able to kind of really simplify that for me. I appreciate that very much, Fran. And I got to say thank you to you. Just from one human being to another, we take for granted, I think, all the people out there in the world that are working hard, like tirelessly hard, dealing with politicians and dealing with data, and not to say dealing with politicians is a problem. Leah's right here, she's one of my favorites. But the point is, but the truth is that, you got so many things coming at you, and you have to sit there and figure out how to put this towards the top of their list, and not just one person's list, right to the household top of their list. And you're doing it, and you don't get much thanks for it, but because of what you're doing, not only your grandkids going to be grateful to you, my kids are going to be grateful to you, my grandkids one day are going to be grateful to you. So it means a lot. And if you haven't heard it, I know you don't hear it enough, but thank you so much.
Thank you
for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks too, because as somebody working in government and as elected representative, it makes such a big difference for people to speak up, take action, set examples, educate. We need it, and the government can't do it. Never can. It's always about people. It's always about people at the grassroots. And that's why people like yourself.
Yeah. But it's also up to government to deliver. So I want to thank you, because it's not easy to be a politician. People assume politicians are in for their own.
Oh, I thought it was easy. I don't actually think you're getting into it because it's easy.
Just if you attend one council meeting, you go cross-eyed at all the stuff they have to listen to.
It's not easy. That's true, actually. That's the whole point of it all, though, right? Is that we don't necessarily, we take things for granted. Yeah. I think we live in an amazing country where you can stand up and speak up, where somebody who you could say is a retired school teacher would be sitting in front of people who are making decisions on policies, and they're listening.
Yeah, I know.
And you're able, it's significant.
Yeah.
It's also significant to talk about, like, the reward on the effort that you've put in. Mm-hmm. Maybe when you first got started, you didn't know that you would be here, at this point. No. Maybe you thought you'd be here a lot sooner. Maybe you never thought you'd even get there. But the fact that you could keep going, and please do keep going.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. We really need it more than we realize it. So
thanks.
Thank you so much, Fran. And thank you, Leah, for putting this together and helping us come together. I know it's a big topic for you as well.
Yeah.
When I usually see Leah, she's got a lot of red on top of what she's got green going today.
She is an environmentalist.
I am.
Leah is a strong environmentalist. There's no noise about it.
But you're a humanitarian at the core.
Yeah.
And appreciate you taking this also really seriously for all of us as well.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing. I mean, getting this out, telling stories, letting people know about things you can do that make a difference. You don't have to be elected. I mean, we all can make a difference, and it can be as simple as, watching our food waste, eating plant-based proteins, or recycling, and it can be getting involved in a
walking instead of riding. I mean, you're big on health, and I appreciate that too. So it's brought that to mind.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure to take the stairs down and the stairs up.
Yeah, I do too. When I go to the doctor's offices, I climb those. Sometimes I'll climb 5 steps and think.
It's inconvenient, but it works, right?
It is. Yeah, it works.
Remember, inconvenient truth.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
And now that's the movie that got me started. Actually.
Yes, it's a great movie.
That got me really activated.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now a movie to watch on top of that.
For sure.
Well, let's get some entertainment.
I could lend you I've got the DVD if you want.
Thank you so much.